day, good morning, good afternoon. This is Dave Rogers with Meet the Author. And today I have an author from Singapore, Miss See Ting Lee, who happens to be in America at the moment. So it's a wonderful opportunity to learn a little bit about her book that she put together, and it's an amazing story. So listen, folks, we're going to be learning all about Gen Z. See Ting, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and why did you write this book?
Sure. Thank you, Dave. Happy to be here, and thank you for connecting. We are finally in somewhat on a similar time zone. I know you're in the EST, I'm in the Pacific time. So glad to be hop onto this call to just share with you a little bit about, the journey and why and how this book came about. So I think this goes back to why I started Kidstarter actually. And it is actually a learning community, entrepreneur community for the young leaders. And so before jumping into more detail, just a little bit of background story about myself. So I left home. So I was born in Malaysia. I left home at the age of 12 and to pursue my education in Singapore, which explained, I spent more than my half of my life in Singapore. And back then it was a tough transition for me as 12 years old, living in a foreign country. I was away from home. I was away from the support system, and I basically couldn't cope with anything, like especially, academically, I couldn't perform in school, which was the very reason why I was in Singapore. So I felt like, I was good for nothing, and I felt like I was a loser. And I remember very clearly that, my dad told me at that point that even you can't do well in school, you can't do well academically, that's not the end of the world. The world is out there. And this has stuck with me till today. So fast forward to many years later, I started Kidstarter. And the reason behind it is really because I want to share my journey and my process to all the young people who might be on the same journey as me. They might be the same journey or similar journey as I am, as I was. But I think the message that I want to get out there is that, that is not the end. So coming back to and before that, the fact that I actually grew up in a family of entrepreneurs and educators, I think having that entrepreneur exposure at a young age actually really helped me to identify what my interests are. So, and I want to provide the equal access of education as well as exposure to all the young kids out there. So coming back to why this book was because when I wrote this book was actually during the pandemic. It was during the lockdown. And everyone thought that it was going to be a 2 weeks lockdown. Nobody knew that, it turned out to be a 2 years lockdown between Singapore and Malaysia border. So I was actually at my parents' place, which was in Malaysia at that point. So I was stuck in a 2 years lockdown. And I call it a blessing in disguise because during that 2 years, a lot has happened. My dad had a stroke and a heart attack during the 2 years time. And 5 months after my dad had a stroke, I actually found out that I had to go through an emergency operation. So my life was upside down. And I'm being really, really honest here, is that I question a lot on, why are things happening in, one after another, and why are things happening to me at a point. And I wasn't okay. I wasn't okay mentally, I wasn't okay physically, I wasn't okay emotionally. But what I realized was that the journey actually makes me who I am, and it helped me discover things that I probably wouldn't have discovered any other way. And there are things that I never know about myself that I actually know during that journey, and it helped me to become who I am today. And the idea of youthing, the Gen Z youthing revolution, the book itself, is that, it talks about each of us is unique. And many of us have shared experiences. And in order to differentiate yourself, you need to embrace your unique story, because the story and the experiences that you have will help you to connect with your audience or your so-called your tribe in a way that nobody else will. Because the fact is that, nobody can be you, and you cannot be anyone else, right? Every one of us have our own set of stories and experiences to share. So there's an example that I like to share, and this is actually the example that I actually shared in the book, is that imagine who is better to help a single mom than to, for example, to build a coaching business than another single mom. And who is better at, helping, knowing the difficulties of bootstrapping a business than someone who actually lose everything and forced to start all over. So that is the main why behind, this ebook called Gen Z, the Yielding Revolution, is that, each of us has a unique story to share, and it has the power to impact the people around you.
Well, congratulations, and thank you so much for your sharing your journey in a way that does immediately comes across your willingness to step into vulnerability, your introspection to see how the most challenging times have been some of your most blessed times. So I'm curious about your advice to perhaps somebody who's listening right now and they're thinking about becoming an author. What advice would you give to an aspiring author, or perhaps someone who's been writing and hasn't been able to complete it? What would be one or two tips that you would have for them?
Well, I would say that is a common problem that all of us run into, because like for me myself, I think it's really important to always remind like the big why behind what you are doing. Like whatever that you're doing right now, I think we always have to look at a bigger picture on, it's a journey of becoming. So to me, what holds me so-called accountable is really behind the whole reason behind why am I doing what I'm doing. And during that period, I think a lot of the motivation and accountability comes from doing it from my dad, because I actually became a caregiver during that 2 years, taking care of my dad. And I was actually being just, home, borders was locked. So to me, I think that to all the aspiring authors out there, there is always the little noise behind us. It's not, it's like, you you're not fit for this, this is not, probably this is not what you're capable of. So I think it's important to set a goal, and it's important to keep yourself accountable, and knowing that, your story has a power to transform life. Don't kind of like underestimate the value of your story, because you never know. One day you might meet someone who share the similar journey and similar experience that you have. And there you go. There is where you start to impact people.
Fantastic. And again, it's funny that talking to you, you use the word loser. And again, when I've done work with people, how many people say that? And even at my age right now, I was doing journaling today, and I wrote the loser word, and it was from a different perspective. Yet it was also quite ironic that you used that. And then the other thing about being a caregiver to your father, since COVID, I came back to Canada after being away for over 30 years. And one of my first tasks was being a caregiver to my dad for the last 3 years. So there's this beautiful thing that happens when we step into vulnerability and we speak from authenticity and a genuineness that builds bridges. And you see a bridge in the back there, and it's that bridge from where we are and maybe where we want to go. And so I love to ask this question, is that if we could get your book into the hands of somebody really well known so that it could go around the world, give me one or two names of people that I'll put the hashtag down in the comments, and we'll see if we can get them a copy of your book. Who would that be in the world?
Oh, I think it would be Gary Vee. And the reason why is I actually have been listening to his podcast, to his sharing before I even venture out on my own. And I think the very common, obstacle that we face, be it as an author or being an entrepreneur or being starting anything, is that, the first step is always hardest to take. Is the hardest leap. And I think it is exactly the same for me when I started. And Gary has been a source of inspiration for me, and it always makes me a little bolder. Every time I kind of like, doubt my idea, doubt myself, I would just tune into Gary Vee, and I just have that little boost of confidence that just helped me to just move forward. And I used to think that, the biggest fear was, what if I decided to do this and I failed? And over time, I realized that my biggest fear is probably when I realized that I've stopped making progress, and I don't even dare to try anymore. I don't even dare to experiment anymore. And I just stay put as where I am. So if I get a chance to share the book, Gary Vee.
Fantastic. Again, thank you for not dropping any F-bombs. Yet Gary Vee has been one of these people that has inspired so many people. I saw him when he came to Singapore. And again, he's
Mm,
got a style that is, on the one hand, it's the shock effect, yet on the other side,
mm,
there's a vulnerability, there's an experience, there's a
mm,
journey that he loves to share and inspire people. So thank you. And
yeah.
it draws that beautiful way that Gen Z also loves to learn. Is that my
Mm,
question tends to be, whose book did you read that impacted you in the last year? Which, please answer that if you have one, or podcast, because these days Gen Z just learns so much through
yeah.
audiobooks, through podcasts. So share a little bit about the way that you've accelerated your learning through
Mm,
different types of social media.
mm. Well, for me, I think one of it definitely would be podcast. So Gary Vee, of course, is one of the ways that I actually, I listen to his podcast, and there has been questions, there have been doubts, especially when I started on journey on entrepreneur learning for kids, like how is that possible? Are they too young and all? And again, I constantly found answers in the podcast by Gary Vee. And on the other hand, in terms of like books that that I have been reading, I think I would say one of my favorite book would be The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And this has been a book that I kind of like just read over and over again. And interestingly, every time when I read, it just seems to be able to give me a fresh perspective. I just able to pick up different things every time when I read. And I like it because what he talks about in the book is that, in order for you to successfully and effectively help others, we got to help, we have to work on our self-mastery as well.
Absolutely. It's funny.
Yeah.
I was interviewing somebody who's a couple of decades older than you the
Uh-huh.
other day, and we came up with How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie as a tip
Oh.
for people who might want to improve their people skills, or getting
Uh-huh.
going into a room and meeting people and breaking through the ice of connecting. And it's one of the things that really encouraging people who are watching this podcast today is that See Ting has shared a couple of strategies and
Mhm,
ideas and connections. Go check it out. It might really resonate with you. I find that sometimes just a word, a name, a book, a
mhm,
referral can be a part of a journey that becomes a mystery and becomes a miracle. So thank you so much. And I guess as I bring this idea, what would be one or two ways that people can reach out to you, some of your social media handles? I'll put them in the
mhm,
comments. I'm
mhm.
inviting people to reach out and check out your book and find a way to be part of your journey in making a difference on this planet. So what would
Yeah,
be a couple of ways for people to reach out, get a copy of your book?
absolutely. So there's a few ways to get connected with me. One will be my LinkedIn. It would be my full name, which is Lee space SEE space TING. And you can also get hold a copy of the book on via Gen Z Secrets, which is GENZ SECRETS.com. I think Dave, you probably can put out in the comments later on. I think that would be easier. And then of course, and on social media as well, on my Instagram, as well as Facebook, and you can find my name at SEETINGG.
Fantastic. Well, it's
Yeah.
very inspiring to have an opportunity to connect with a Gen Zer, somebody who is making a difference, traveling around the world, writing, inspiring, involved with entrepreneurs for kids. It's actually one of the key messages that I've had for the last
Mhm.
15 years working in Malaysia, actually, with the first
Oh.
entrepreneur school for kids, 3 Mas
Mhm,
and 2 Mas. And it's been so amazing to see best practices from around the world come into Malaysia, come into
mhm,
Singapore, and being
mhm,
infused. And I guess that would be one of the topics that we might have another opportunity to meet and discuss offline. And my last little question is, if there's a philosophy you have right
mhm,
now,
mhm,
one or two key tips that you would love people to hear,
mhm,
perhaps from your book or perhaps from your heart today, what would it be?
mhm. I think um I'll take it as it's a kind of a piece of takeaway or advice that I would give people who are probably watching this video is, I don't know what journey you are on, and I don't know what is your story, anyone who's watching this video, but I feel like, if there is a part of you that you feel like, you want to kickstart your own revolution and you have a small idea. It could be a small idea or it could be a small movement that you just want to turn it in an idea into a reality. I would say do it. And I encourage you that, I just want to encourage you that, it is possible no matter how impossible it might seem. And the reason behind is because you are really doing it for yourself, and not doing for other people.
Wise words
Yeah.
from a author, from an entrepreneur, a caregiver. So folks,
Yes.
please like this, comment, share it, and allow that energy to pass around the world. We really appreciate you, and thank you for joining us today on Meet the Author.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave.